We're going to get started because we have an exciting panel for you today. My name is Deborah Gonzalez, and I'm the Government Affairs Director here at PPIC. And I wanted to thank you for joining us today, especially on a really beautiful day because it's not 108, and so why aren't we outside? I mean, I don't know. For those of you who are not familiar with PPIC, we're a nonpartisan nonprofit that has offices in both San Francisco and Sacramento. For today's program, we are presenting work from our PPIC Higher Education Center. You will first hear from researcher Kevin Cook, who will present some key findings from a new report on meeting California's need for college graduates at a regional perspective. You should have found a copy of the report on your chair. Additionally, copies are available back at the registration and also available online. One of Kevin's co-authors, Hans Johnson, is the head of our Higher Education Center, is also here today, and he will moderate the panel discussion. Marisol Mejia also co-authored this report. She's on maternity leave, so we hope she's watching and love that baby. We would very much like to thank the College Futures Foundation and the Sutton Fund for their support of this work. The slides from today's presentation are also available online. After Kevin's presentation, we should have time for a couple questions about the report, but then we will invite our panelists to come up here. There's some water, so that'd be great. Our water center always makes us put water out, which is great. And in the interest of time, we won't do formal acknowledgments of your backgrounds, but you'll find information about them in the back of your agenda. We'll also, after they found their chair, there'll be plenty of time for questions and answers with the panelists. A few more things before we get started. Please silence your cell phone. Last time I was here, I actually left mine on, so I apologize about that. So please do that. It's very embarrassing. We'll also, of course, send you out a survey. A major piece of what PPIC does is we survey folks internally, externally, everywhere. So please respond to those. We do get the feedback, and it's very helpful for us. I was talking to Kevin this morning about what is the essential feature, what is the essential finding about this report, and at its simplest point, it actually reiterates a finding of our earlier work that California is experiencing a significant degree gap, and that we need to graduate students more quickly and at a lower cost, or at least keep the cost from growing dramatically. And as a parent of a college student, I really wholeheartedly agree with that, and particularly about my college student. She's in her last year, thank goodness. Policymakers tend to talk in California about a California solution, and many times we look for that one single silver bullet that will solve a problem. But nothing's simple in a state this size, with the complexity, with economic disparities in different parts of the state, with geographic and ethnic differences. But each region of the state has unique challenges, and this report tries to identify those. It may be that some school students have to travel 100 miles in the Central Valley to find the school that fits their needs, or in LA, take 3 hours to travel 20 minutes. Those are two challenges, but they're actually challenges. I know I sound like a little bitter LA resident, because I was for many years. We can't fix problems we don't see is something I've always told my children, and this report will help, hopefully, identify those problems and help us identify some potential solutions. And while this discussion focuses on the 4-year degree gap, I don't want you to think that PPIC and policymakers aren't concerned about another really important pipeline, and that's the CTE world. And we at PPIC recognize this, and we'll be doing some work in the future. We actually talk to our researchers a lot about how this is an important engine that provides invaluable opportunities for many Californians. So stay tuned to that work. Now I'd like to invite PPIC Researcher Associate Kevin Cook up to the stage for his presentation.
Okay, well, thank you, Deborah, and thanks everyone for coming out. I would like to reiterate our thanks to the College Futures Foundation and the Sutton Family Fund for supporting this work, and also would like to thank Hans and Marisol again for their important work on this. So, to begin, California's growing economy relies heavily on highly educated workers. Previous PPIC research has shown that by year 2030, the state will need to produce an additional 1.1 million college graduates above the current pace to meet future economic demand. In order to meet this target, the state must improve college graduation for underrepresented groups and work to close persistent achievement gaps. Given that most college students attend college close to home, usually within 20 miles of their permanent home, developing regional strategies is essential. Let's get the, hold on one second while I get the slides ready. Excuse me. There we go. Okay. So, this report focuses on 3 regions that will play an especially critical role in closing the skills gap: the Los Angeles County region, the Inland Empire, and the San Joaquin Valley. Indeed, our research has shown that improving student outcomes in these regions could help close more than half of the statewide skills gap. Together, Los Angeles County, the Inland Empire, and the San Joaquin Valley are home to almost half of the state's population, with nearly 10 million residents in Los Angeles and more than 4 million residents in the Inland Empire and San Joaquin Valley, respectively. Furthermore, the populations of these regions will soon be majority Latino, and low-income and first-generation students constitute the majority of students in each region, and young adults are a disproportionately large share of the population in the Inland Empire and the San Joaquin Valley. Additionally, these regions are similar in that household incomes are lower on average in comparison to the rest of the state. In particular, these regions have high shares of children in poverty, many with parents who never attended college. These demographic and economic realities constitute real challenges with regards to college outcomes, as first-generation, low-income, and underrepresented minority students are often less likely to graduate from college than other students. However, it should be noted that over the last decade or so, educational outcomes across the state, and in these 3 regions specifically, have improved. For example, when we look at the percentage of high school graduates who complete the college preparatory course sequence known in California as the A through G requirement, we see on average an 8 to 9% increase since 2005. So as you can see, the percentage of high school graduates completing college preparatory courses in Los Angeles County is now higher than the state average, although comparatively there is significant room for improvement in the Inland Empire and San Joaquin Valley. Graduating from college is the culmination of a long educational journey that begins as early as preschool. Along this journey, there are critical transition points where students fall out of the education pipeline. To name a few: high school graduation, the transition from high school to college, persistence in college, and transfer from a community college to a 4-year institution. Based on our analysis of this pipeline, in California, for every 1,000 ninth grade students entering high school, only 225 will earn a bachelor's degree from a UC or CSU. Figure 4 in your report breaks this pipeline down by individual regions if you want to check it out. The transition from high school graduation to 4-year college matriculation is particularly important as high school graduates who go directly to 4-year colleges are much more likely to earn a bachelor's degree than those who enroll in community college. When we look at the share of recent college graduates who enroll in a UC or CSU, we see significant variation with each region facing unique challenges. For example, in Los Angeles County, the share of students earning a bachelor's degree is slightly higher than the state average, even though the region has slightly lower high school graduation rates. The Inland Empire, which has higher graduation rates than the state average, high school graduation, particularly struggles with sending enough students to college once they graduate. The San Joaquin Valley has above average high school graduation rates and college enrollment rates. However, the region struggles with respect to community college transfer to 4-year colleges and universities. Furthermore, there are significant differences in UC and CSU enrollment by race, ethnicity, and gender. Across all regions, Asian high school graduates are much more likely than other ethnic groups to enroll in UC, with similar but less pronounced patterns at CSU. And notably, in every region, Latino high school graduates are more likely to attend a CSU than white high school graduates. And for every region and every ethnic group, men are less likely to enroll in 4-year public universities than women. So what can regions do to close the skills gap? At a basic level, there are 4 overarching strategies to increasing bachelor's degree production. First, improving college readiness for graduating high school students is key. Increasing the number of students who are eligible to attend a 4-year college out of high school will increase the overall pool of potential college grads and will reduce the need for remedial coursework once they arrive at college. Second, and possibly the most efficient strategy, is to continue to raise four-year completion rates for students already enrolled in college, thereby freeing up additional spaces for transfers and incoming freshmen. And then third, increasing the number of transfer students from community college and streamlining the transfer process will have a substantial impact on increasing the number of bachelor degrees produced, as will, of course, enrolling more first-time freshmen. However, colleges and universities face real challenges in implementing these strategies. Though state funding for higher education has increased since the Great Recession, capacity constraints are still an issue. The conversation surrounding capacity tends to focus on physical space, such as the number of dorm beds, the amount of lab space, and the classroom availability. But most of the ongoing costs associated with increasing enrollment are actually related to funded capacity, or the need for additional faculty to teach additional course sections, and the need for increased student services to ensure that students have the support they need to graduate on time. Furthermore, student services and support staff will be essential in maintaining and continuing to improve completion rates, especially at the community colleges and the CSU. There are also issues with the geographic dispersion of four-year colleges in a large state like California. As I noted before, most students attend a college located within 20 miles of their permanent home. For example, 2/3 of CSU students attend a campus that is in their home county or in an adjacent one. Research has shown that distance to a four-year college has a significant impact on college-going rates, and students of color are less likely to enroll on a campus that is further away from their home. Impaction at CSU is also a barrier. Impaction is a policy at CSU campuses that allows a campus to establish admissions criteria that go beyond system-wide criteria, thereby allowing the campus to turn away otherwise eligible students. 6 CSU campuses are now fully impacted, and another 6 of the 23 campuses have only 2 or fewer majors that are not impacted. A recent estimate by CSU noted they turned away 30,000 eligible students in 2015-16 due to impaction. Other barriers include low four-year graduation rates at CSU and, to some extent, UC, low transfer rates from the state's community colleges, and persistent achievement gaps between underrepresented minority students and their white and Asian counterparts. Though these barriers exist, the higher education systems and colleges have been making progress on all fronts, and there are promising programs being implemented across the higher education pipeline. California has bucked the national trend and is one of the few states that has steadily increased funding for higher education since the Great Recession. There's also been an intense focus on improving student success and closing achievement gaps. The CSU, for example, has announced that by 2025 it intends to increase its system-wide 6-year graduation rate to 70% and intends to eliminate gaps in graduation rates between groups of students. The business community has stepped up its involvement by funding and supporting regional efforts to increase college completion. Also, new privately funded satellite campuses have been developed to meet local demand for higher education and to produce a more highly skilled workforce. After years of stagnation, the community college system has undertaken important new initiatives to improve student outcomes. Of particular note are the Basic Skills Initiative, which will improve remedial education and placement policies, modernize and standardize basic skills curriculum, fund professional development, and support rigorous, evidence-based evaluation of these policies and programs. The new Guided Pathways Initiative at the community college system is also promising. Based on decades of research, this student-focused program seeks to transform community college curriculum, transfer agreements, student services, and administration to provide students with a clear, easy-to-follow path to their chosen educational goal. 11 of the 20 pilot colleges chosen to be included in the first iteration of the Guided Pathways Initiative are located in the regions we studied for this report. So based on our empirical analysis, our policy analysis, and conversations with college presidents and business leaders, we have developed a set of policy recommendations described in detail near the end of the report. First, if the multitude of efforts at the K-12 and community college systems to increase college readiness and transfer rates are successful, and we believe that there's evidence to show that they are, the state will need to increase capacity at its four-year universities. Boosting efforts to continue increasing four-year graduation rates are important, but we also suggest that the expansion of satellite campuses like the CSU San Bernardino Palm Desert campus is an efficient way to build capacity, and pilot new campuses which could eventually grow to become self-supporting campuses of their own. Second, the implementation of the Guided Pathways Initiative is an important opportunity to align community college success initiatives and improve intersegmental coordination between the UC, CSU, and even regional private colleges. For example, as community colleges redesign curriculum and develop student pathways, coordination with CSU and the successful Associate's Degree for Transfer program could help to streamline the transfer process and provide students with greater choice when it comes to their major and help improve their time to degree. Third, Promise programs like the Long Beach Promise and Fresno Promise could be standardized and expanded to the regional level. Promise programs seek to increase college enrollment by offering future financial assistance to elementary and middle school students in a specific area with benefits that may include a semester or two of free tuition, increased support services, and priority or guaranteed admissions to a local college as long as that student completes the necessary coursework and maintains satisfactory academic progress. Currently, there are 27 separate Promise programs across the state with varying guarantees and levels of support. Furthermore, the localized nature of Promise programs as they exist now create place-based inequities in which two otherwise identical students may not be eligible for the same tuition support or enrollment priority to their local four-year college simply due to where they live or where they attend school. Regional Promise programs, which include all districts in a region, community colleges, and four-year public colleges, would be better positioned to leverage regional resources and provide outreach to more low-income communities. We also proposed that CSU develop regional referral pools for eligible students turned away from the campus to which they applied due to impaction. Regional referral pools would grant a student priority enrollment to multiple nearby campuses, thereby incentivizing enrollment in a four-year college close to the student's home and could help increase enrollment in non-impacted CSU campuses like Dominguez Hills and Bakersfield. Finally, the lack of a statewide longitudinal student-level data system has not prevented regional collaborative groups from developing their own data sharing networks, and the state could do much more to help these efforts. Regional entities like the Central Valley Higher Education Consortium in the San Joaquin Valley and Growing Inland Achievement in the Inland Empire have funding and dedicated staff to improve regional coordination between educational systems and have developed data sharing agreements to evaluate what types of interventions work best to improve student outcomes. The state could provide funding, could help achieve economies of scale, could reduce redundancies in the number of vendors, as well as lay a foundation for a standardized data platform that would allow for future data sharing across regions. With that, I'd like to invite our panelists up, and I will hand the podium over to Hans Johnson, our moderator.
So thanks, Kevin. So it's my pleasure to moderate this discussion among our distinguished panelists. I won't go into their biographies, but they are available in the materials that you have at your seat. To my immediate right is Ben Duran. He is head of the Central Valley Higher Education Consortium. Next to him is Alma Salazar with the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce. And then on my far right is Ken O'Donnell, who is at CSU Dominguez Hills. And my first question is maybe kind of a softball question, but I think it's important for all of you and for all of us to hear about some of the activities that are happening regionally. So often here in Sacramento, we're focused on state policy, system-wide policy for UC, CSU, or the community colleges, but there's a tremendous amount of activity happening within these regions that we've identified. And each one of these panelists could tell us a little bit about that. So my first question, and we'll just start with Ben, and then Alma, and then Ken, and then we could take the conversation from there, is if you could just briefly describe some of the activities happening in your region, whether intersegmentally, with the business community, between the higher education partners and K-12 and so on. So Ben, why don't you start?
Absolutely. Thank you, Hans. Appreciate being asked. So the Central Valley Higher Education Consortium is an organization that was started in 2000, primarily to create a place where the colleges and the universities in the Central Valley could speak with a single voice. And the unique features of this organization is that it includes the community colleges, the 3 CSUs from Kern County all the way up to San Joaquin County. It includes the new UC Merced and includes some of our private and independent partners. So it brings all 4 segments of higher education together. And in doing so, we really wanted to be able to talk about issues that matter to us all, and staying away from issues that were controversial to some of us, right? What we want to do is concentrate on things that matter for the well-being of our students in the Valley. So more recently, the consortium has been involved in a number of initiatives. We've partnered with College Futures Foundation. We've partnered with an organization called Complete College America. We've partnered with the CAP, with the California Acceleration Project. And so what we've done is we've chosen as a consortium. Oh, and by the way, the board of directors of the consortium are all the presidents and the chancellors of the institutions. And so when we bring the board together and we decide on a particular direction, it isn't as if they go home and they kind of top down and say, we're going to do this. What they do is they go home and they tell the champions on their campuses in those particular areas is, we've got your back, we're behind you, we're the CEOs, we're behind you. So we've launched, for instance, a co-requisite remediation effort in the Central Valley to include all of our community colleges to start to address the remediation issue. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with someone from the Dana Center who's coming in, and with the assistance of College Futures Foundation, we're actually going to do a 3-year math pathways effort to try to get our colleges and hopefully our CSUs involved in creating math pathways for students to get through those gateway courses. So the co-remediation issue for us is getting students, we talk about this, these kids not transferring out of community colleges. Well, it's tough when you get through those gateway courses. And we know that there are, I mean, it's like we have in the, I don't know how many people we have in the room, 150 people. So if 150 of you went to a community college, at the end of 3 or 4 years, only like 15 or 20 of you would transfer. That doesn't make any sense, right? And we know that there are reasons for that happening. So we're starting to address that. Another of the items that we're dealing with is trying to talk with our students, especially in the community colleges, about trying to get to 15 units per semester or 30 units a year, if they possibly can. We don't want to diminish those kids. We know, I mean, like those of us who attended community college work part-time, right? And so a lot of us weren't able to go full-time. But when you're able to go to school full-time, the research is showing that you're far less likely to drop out, you're going to finish quicker, you're going to get through faster. And when you do the arithmetic, folks, and you have a kid that can get his degree or her degree in 4 years, and start earning 40 or 50 grand a year, versus staying a 5th and 6th year and paying that much to stay in school. I mean, look at the swing, right? In just a 3-year swing. So one of the efforts that we're trying to push is trying to get students to really seriously think about getting through the degrees, getting their degrees faster. And then it's up to the universities and the colleges to have the seats and that sort of thing. And then the other item that we're working on, and I'll stop here and maybe talk later, but trying to create a data sharing platform across the Valley, so that what we're trying to do is create this platform across the Valley, both in all of our initiatives. We're trying to scale these things up in all our colleges and universities, so that hopefully in 2 or 3 years, when you come to the Central Valley, if you go to any of our colleges, they're all doing their own versions of it, but doing the same sorts of things.
So thanks, Ben. So Alma, I know you've been involved a lot on these issues in Los Angeles. I think it might be helpful for people to first hear why the Chamber is even interested in this topic, and then hear about some of those efforts.
Absolutely. So I have the privilege of representing a regional chamber of commerce that represents 1,600 member companies in the LA Basin. And you may ask, why does a chamber care about this work? And the truth of the matter is, when we work directly with many of our member companies and our employer partners and our business champions, we recognize the interdependency of all these critical puzzle pieces. Recognizing that when you talk about institutional challenges and really addressing achievement gaps and barriers, that it is not one institution alone that owns that responsibility, that it truly is a commitment between our early education, K-12, higher ed, workforce development partners to coalesce around a shared agenda. But we also recognize that oftentimes is hard. There are geopolitical, institutional, myriad of barriers that keep our institutions from working together. But the Chamber has, for the last several years, I think since 2008, has led an effort known as the LA Compact in the LA region. We do what all great organizations do. We take someone else's idea and try to make it better. So we really borrowed from Boston. And for us, the LA Compact is a shared commitment from 23 institutions in the LA Basin, from the mayor's office, the community colleges, the school district, the Federation of Teachers, United Way, all of the critical partners in LA coalesced around 3 goals. 1, all students graduate from high school, they graduate college and career ready, and they have access to post-secondary and career opportunities. Very simply. Believe it or not, it probably took us a better part of 4 years to reach an agreement such as that. But through that, we've been able to establish a myriad of work groups, and one in particular is focused around the post-secondary dimension of this work. So it isn't just about high school graduation, but how are we creating those pathways for our young adults, particularly into not only accessing, but completing a post-secondary education. Through that, we have a work group known as the Institute of Higher Ed Collaborative. These are 12 both public, private, post-secondary institutions in the LA Basin who work towards a shared student success agenda. And just to give you a glimpse into, and again, I'm going really high level because if I take you too deep, it may confuse you, but kind of the 3 areas that we have coalesced around in terms of post-secondary completion has been bringing these institutions together to focus on currently 3 core areas. One, of course, is the associate degree for transfer and making sure that our institutions are working collectively to achieve that. And I can say that over the last couple of years, it really has coalesced around 3 core areas. One, of course, is accelerating ADT pathway implementation, trying very hard to bring those efforts to scale, both from our community colleges and, of course, our receiving CSU partners. But in the interim, we're learning that until we reach full scale, we're also having to address alignment between existing ADT pathways. So how do we really try to work with our partners to address those challenges? The other item that the group has also coalesced around is how do we address issues around communicating and outreaching to students and informing them of these ADT pathways? How do we ensure that they're well informed and are not only actively seeking them, but are engaged and informed students themselves? A second area that this group has coalesced around has been around reverse transfer. So not only working towards baccalaureate degree attainment, but how are we addressing the issue of those students who began as four-year full-time freshmen, but at some point stopped out? How are we recapturing those students so that not only are we getting them re-enrolled in a community college, but we're putting them back on an ADT pathway to get them back on course to complete their baccalaureate degree? That, as you would imagine, requires a tremendous amount of collaboration, coordination between the community colleges and the CSUs to try to make that happen. We were successful as a region to be among one of the Innovation Award recipients, and our effort is really to pilot this reverse transfer model so that we are able to scale it in the coming years. And then thirdly, we've had the good fortune of having tremendous leadership coalesce around the College Promise Initiative. Similarly, our region was a recipient of one of the College Promise Awards, but before that, it's really been us as a collaborative and with much engagement from our critical partners around not just focused around providing students with first year of paid tuition, but how are we integrating all of the strategies that we have at our disposal. So making sure it's reflective of the Student Success Initiative, of guided pathways, of ADTs, so that we're in essence collectively packaging this for students so that they're not seen as disparate initiatives. So I'm going to pause there momentarily. And that was a very long-winded response to your question, Hans, in terms of why is the Chamber involved in this, but I just want to give you context for what we're working on in LA.
That was great and very informative. And then Ken, same general question. Ken brings both a system-wide and institutional perspective, and an institution, the California State University, that has for a long time tried to engage with especially K-12 through college readiness issues, but is also operating very much for most of the CSUs as regional campuses and regional universities. So maybe you could talk about that.
Sure, happy to. And thanks for having me. Thanks to all of you for your interest. We were very pleased to see the production of this report. The work that PPIC does, it's very sound. It's good research. It's well informed. And the arguments that they make for improved funding, for improved data structures are always welcome for us. We would welcome support like that from the state, really from any quarters. At CSU Dominguez Hills, we're doing a few things that echo what you heard first of all from Kevin about improving capacity by improving student success rates. When you can improve time to degree, and when you can make more of the matriculations convert to degree holders, you've already improved capacity without adding a single additional seat. And we are on that. Just a few years ago at my institution, CSU Dominguez Hills, our 6-year graduation rate was hovering below 30%. And that's because we are an access-oriented institution. We serve some extremely challenged high school districts in the South Bay of California, in the LA area, areas including South Los Angeles and Compton and Watts. But we also serve some relatively expensive neighborhoods closer to the coast, like Manhattan Beach and Hermosa Beach. And in that split, it's been very hard for us to deliver an appropriate education that gives every student an equitable shot at graduating. We are working hard on that. And in just the last few years, we've moved our graduation rate on the 6-year horizon from around 30% to, as of the last count, 42.4%. And that's a rise really in about a 4-year period. Pretty much unprecedented anywhere. And you only get that way when you have a concerted effort on campus, all the pieces fitting together. We're now taking that energy and turning it to the 4-year graduation rate, because that too is a good play for capacity. The quicker you can move students through the pipe, the more you free up space for the next one coming in behind. And as a result of efforts like this, we are one of the very few CSUs left in the state that has not declared impaction of any kind. And we don't want to. We really don't. We want to reconcile the imbalances between demand and supply by improving student success. And we're pretty proud of that. That means doing some of the things you've been talking about, the cooperation with the K-12 to get the preparation in place so that more students have a realistic hope of getting out in 4 years because they don't need remediation. To that end, we are highly involved in all the things you just heard Alma say. So I'm going to cash in on some of her time and say, there, now I don't have to repeat all that. We are huge fans of the LA Chamber of Commerce. And as Hans pointed out, they take a very enlightened approach to their work by involving post-secondary to the extent they do. And we really appreciate that. All of the projects she rattled off are dear to our hearts. I'm going to describe 2 that weren't on your list because they originated with us, and then I'll turn things back over to Hans. One of them, still on the topic of K-12, is what we call the Center for STEM Innovation. This is a partnership of the kind that this report most strongly urges. It's between us, the area community colleges and K-12, and also Toyota and some other private backers, including some significant 7-figure gifts that have made possible investment in mobile fab labs, fabrication laboratories. These are maker spaces that include 3D printers that we can send out to the area schools as early as 6th grade to get kids from all backgrounds excited about STEM education. It's gangbusters, and it works only because we got out of our own campus footprint and worked with the regional partners. The other one that I'll mention to you is a series that we call the Future Forum focusing on industries of interest in Southern California, our region in particular. That would be aerospace, defense, entertainment, health, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, a lot of the things that Southern California is known for, we want to lean in toward. And so we've been hosting these roughly once a month gatherings, inviting people from Dominguez Hills, but also from Cal State Northridge, from CSU Los Angeles, from UCLA, and again from the community colleges and from the K-12 and the relevant industries for each of those sectors, to talk about what they need, and in particular to look ahead to what they're gonna need so that we can start getting those workers ready today while they're still in school. Not to end on a glum note, but we could use more help. Two of them are in areas you already heard about, the data and the money, which you always hear about. But the other one that I'll throw in, and I was talking to our university president about this yesterday, saying this event was coming up and was there anything that we should convey? And what we hit on was a little bit subtle, but I'll share it. And it has to do with infrastructure. Aside from the enrollment funding, and aside from intersegmental data, there's the reality that about 40% of the classes offered at CSU Dominguez Hills take place in classrooms that are past their useful lives. 40%. And when you talk about a regional approach to workforce preparation and pipeline relationships with our community colleges and our elementary schools and high schools, that means that the culminating educational event, the thing that happens on our campus, has to be ready for the industry. Our equipment needs to look like their equipment, and it doesn't. And because of quirks in the way funding is allocated in the state, we're a little bit fettered in our effort to bring that up to date. It really does take partnerships with groups like Toyota and others to fill in that gap, and that's labor intensive. And so think about infrastructure when you think about things you can do.
Okay, thanks. So we heard a lot about different programs, different levels of cooperation, which I think are really encouraging. It's obviously why you're on the panel here to talk about what's happening in these regions. But I'm wondering, how do you know what you're doing is making a difference? And how do you know you're reaching the students you need to be reaching? I mean, it's often the case when you look at innovation awards or grants, the people who do the best are the ones that are the most organized, the most thoughtful, the most forward-thinking. And the schools that maybe aren't participating, or the colleges or the schools that don't have promise programs, are maybe the ones that need them more than anyone else. And it's partly why, in general, our suggestions and recommendations have been to try to make efforts as systematic and consistent across the entire region as possible. And so I'm wondering if you could answer, and there's a lot of questions there, but one was kind of the data, which people have alluded to. How do you know whether students are doing well, whether you're reaching the right students? And then this kind of question about consistency and being systematic across the region. And I'll let whoever wants to talk about that first go ahead. Alma? Okay, great.
Wonderful. I mean, I think to answer your earlier question, Hans, in terms of how do we know that we're being successful, and actually I'm going to also frame this as a need. I would say that one of the areas where we've probably spent an inordinate amount of time is just trying to coalesce and agree on the data. And it's been something that I think is a tremendous lift for us regionally, not having a statewide longitudinal system, not having even a baseline by which you can get all your partners to agree what you're working towards. So all that to say is, how successful are we? At best we can tell, we have a lot of room for growth.
Okay.
However, I think the strides that I think the approach is always anchored around systems change. And that neither happens quickly, and if anything, it's a 5-10 year process before you actually see any yields around, if you're lucky, around what you want to see. So I would say it's been slow, it's been incremental. However, we strongly believe that by bringing our partners together, that we are trying to build economies of scale and rapidly get to build capacity, because we're in essence all rowing in the same direction.
Great. And Ben, you brought this up a little bit already, but I'm wondering, one thing we hear in Sacramento is that if the locals want to use data or have a longitudinal student database, well, then they can do it. They can do it within their own institutions, and they can create these consortiums. I know you're trying to do that on the data side with your group. This is a self-serving question, would it be helpful if the state, for example, had a longitudinal student database that they could help provide information to you about what's happening to your high school graduates, and especially, they don't all stay in the region, and what their educational outcomes are like, and what are you doing to overcome the lack of something like that?
English is my second language, so when you said locals, I thought you said locos. And there are enough locals in the valley for us to really pursue this issue. So
I'm one.
In LA too, by the way.
So, to answer your question with respect to the local issues, so Fresno Unified and State Center Community College District in Fresno State, along with UC Merced, with some assistance from the foundation, literally developed such a platform. It's pretty robust, and the nice thing about it is it allows young people, parents, counselors, community college folks, and CSU folks, UC folks, to track these kids at any given time. It's real-time data, right? Real-time information. The problem with us, as I'm telling you, we're trying to scale things up in the valley. This one is difficult to scale up. It's not scalable at this particular point because it's pretty pricey, we think. And as a result of that, there is a silo, if you will, in the Fresno area where this is happening. We're looking at other potential folks who can come in and provide a similar sort of a thing. And so we're starting to have conversations with our folks in the north and their folks in the south about certain things. So to answer your question, it would be wonderful. Because to be honest with you, my wife used to be on the textbook review thing for the state. And it's like these poor vendors coming in and wanting to sell their text. Well, it's the same thing with data platforms, right? You have different folks trying to sell their data, and the state isn't assisting us, right? And as a result of that, we don't know. And so what we don't need is someone in the south using a particular vendor and someone in the north using one, and as a result of that, not being able to talk with each other. And so for us in the Central Valley, and I think in California, it certainly would be really, really helpful if there were a system, a platform where literally we could talk to each other. So if Dominguez Hills wanted to know about some kids in Fresno City or in Merced, where I'm from, that they literally would be able to get that information. And currently we just don't have that. And like Alma's saying, we're not far enough along on that. Other than what's going on in Fresno and conversations that we're starting to have now, we're just not far enough along on that in terms of data platforms. That's one of the big pieces. As I was laying out a number of things, we have a compact, also the Fresno Compact, and partially funded through the Lumina Foundation, and that's a big piece for them. They're looking for data, and so we're generating data. So how do we know that we're impacting students right now? We're literally having to mine the different colleges, and we're having to send queries out, and as opposed to going somewhere and being able to pull a kid up or being able to pull up a particular class and that sort of a thing.
And Ken, I mean, you're at an institution that actually touches on, you get high school records from students, you get community college transcripts from students, you have your own internal data, so you gave us some statistics, for example, on how the completion rate has changed. So maybe your challenge isn't so great, or maybe it still is.
No, it's great and it's worse. And here's why: we're the last stop, right? It's one thing for the K-12 system and the community college system to use a longitudinal data set to say, how did we do? Are they getting into the CSU? Are they thriving when they get there? After us, they're going out into the world, right? It's their lives, it's their jobs, it's all the things they wanted out of a college education, some of them very hard to describe. They want to lead full lives. They want to be happy. Count that. You know, we want the statewide longitudinal data set for all the reasons you're describing, but we're also pretty keen on gathering other, like to your question, how do you know? By asking everyone in earshot. We have 4 academic colleges on my campus, and every one of them has an advisory board of employer groups to tell us how we're doing. And that won't show up in a longitudinal data set, but it's of keen interest to us. We also ask our students all the time, how are you doing? We're fans of tools that are emerging out there like the Gallup-Purdue Index that ask, are you happy with your life? Are you glad you went to college? And you ask them not just the year after they graduate, but 10 years later, 20 years later. That's when some of those payoffs really start to appear. And then finally, this will sound a little schmaltzy, so bear with me. Our recently configured marketing department has a campaign on our campus called I'm a Toro, and Toro is our mascot. And we have these banners up around campus with these images that are intended to be inspiring and are of CSU Dominguez Hills alumni who are working in really, really cool jobs and smiling out at these banners going, I'm a Toro. And they say what they do for a living and they've got the name and the graduation year. And that's how we know. That is really how we know.
Thanks. So in thinking about this pipeline, this is my last question, then I'll open it up to the audience. In thinking about this pipeline, there's critical components to it, critical moments in a student's life. How do you prioritize and make sure that you're reaching, and the reason we chose these regions partly is because of the incredible diversity of the population in the regions, the incredible need. If we as a state are going to be successful, these regions need to come along. And if we're going to be successful as a state, we need to reach students who traditionally have not been on a college pathway or come from families where no one has ever gone to college and come from low-income families. And so I know this is one of the central issues that all of you are working on and one of the reasons that you're doing the work you're doing. But maybe if you could talk about what you see happening in that area and what kind of successes or challenges and failures that you might be having and experiencing. And we'll go ahead and start with whoever wants to start. Alma moved first. So again, Alma.
I really need to stop moving.
Short straw.
I think for us, we're in the LA basin, so for many of our institution, it is largely majority minority. So in large part, given our composition, we are serving those students who are largely underrepresented. I would say that we need to continue to do a better job, is particularly with those students and families where you have a chronic either unemployment or barriers to success. And it really, for us, has been not only working with our educational institutions, but really also looking at ways in which we can partner with Health and Human Services, ways in which we could partner with, we have a whole what's called an Opportunity Youth Collaborative that focuses specifically on foster youth and formerly incarcerated young adults. So it really is going beyond our respective silos and reaching into other systems and looking at ways in which we can not only do cross-sector work, but again, trying to get our institutions to coalesce around where they can lend their collective strengths to help us address some of these issues. Again, are we at scale? Not quite, but at the very least, we're having those conversations. We're trying to get at, okay, where do we need the most support? And recognizing that in some of our institutions, we have limitations in terms of support and services, but yet we have other systems that we can and should be tapping into who have strengths that can help us address some of these challenges.
So have you done a needs assessment, for example, and just kind of looked at what schools are engaged, which ones aren't, or things like that?
Not region-wide, Hans. A lot of our focus point has been around LA Unified School District, because obviously second largest school district, comprise about 2/3 of the K-12 student population in LA County. So we've done most of our work there, but we are increasingly moving much more regional in nature, where we are trying to now be focused on a county-wide approach. So our initial focus was LA Unified specific.
And Ben?
Yeah, when the Central Valley Higher Education Consortium was conceptualized by John Welty, who was president at Fresno State at the time, he had a real concern about the low Latino male going rate. Men don't go to college as much as women do, as it turns out, but Latino males it was really bad. And as a result of that, he pulled together a group of us, and we pulled this consortium together. And so originally the focus was, and it still is, it isn't as if we've gotten away from it, was creating access, going out and reaching out and pulling these young folks in. But what we started to realize, and at the time I was a president of Merced Community College, but what we were finding was that it was one thing for a guy like me to go out and say, hey, you know what, I used to be a farmer, I used to be there, and you know, it can do, and to bring them in. But then when we turned around a semester or two later, they were not there any longer, right? So it wasn't so much even, it was still an issue of getting folks in, but the other issue was, how do we retain them? How do we keep them here, right? Well, at the time we started toying with this notion of well, when a kid comes in and they test in at 3 or 4 levels below college level English or college level math, and they wallow in remedial courses, then they start to peel off. Because I saw a kid at Lowe's, and I said, hey, how's it going? He said, Mr. Duran, he says, I tried it, but I was taking that math class and that English class, and I got this job, and so and that broke my heart. So we started thinking way back when about co-requisite classes, actually bringing together CTE courses together with the basic skills, to make sure that students were getting the kinds of courses they were going to be interested in to try to keep them there. So we fast forward to where the Central Valley Higher Ed Consortium is now. So the issue for us has been, as Kevin said in his opening remarks, in the Central Valley, we have a pretty high college going rate, but they're mostly in the community colleges, right? But what we're not doing is we're not getting them from there to the CSU, the UC, and by the way, the privates and independents. I'll tell you a story about that in a little while. Because that is an alternative for a lot of our kids. Because when you look at 2-year guarantee of getting the heck out of a Fresno Pacific versus staying at a CSU longer, sometimes they go, hey, you know what, it's worth the trouble. But anyway, but with respect to that, so one of the things that we really started to look at was what was happening. What was this logjam? And again, I go back to this notion of co-requisite remediation of English and math, English 1A, college algebra, right? Those are the gateway courses, and a lot of the kids get bogged up there. There's a bill that's moving through AB 705, which looks at multiple measures for the placement of students in remedial courses, and that's going to help an awful lot, because we think that a lot of students were misplaced, and there are just a lot of things that we need to do with K-12. But when you look at the research around co-requisite remediation, it's like 20% kids go on to transfer, 70% if they're co-rec. It doesn't make any sense not to look at it. So our faculties in the Valley, so our English faculty and our math faculty are leading the conversation amongst our colleges. And we are going to really, I'm not saying we're trying to, we're going to scale up these co-requisite remediation efforts in the Central Valley to all of our community colleges. And then I was happy to see Chancellor White talking about reforming remediation at the CSU, because my sense is maybe similar sorts of things are happening there. So that's a huge push for us. That's a really huge push for us, because we think that if we can get them through those gateway courses. And then another issue between the community colleges and the CSU is a memorandum that they have with respect to pathways, like what is the math that they actually have to take once they get to the CSU? And that's a whole nother, that's like a fist fight right now. So we can talk about that, but they have come together to say, you know what, we're going to really, really look at this to make sure that once students get into the CSU, they're not going to get bogged down also by a math requirement maybe that isn't necessary for certain majors. So anyway, that's where we're heading.
And there's a tremendous amount of equity considerations in those placement processes, and we've done some work on that, and we're actually continuing to do work on looking at developmental education reform in community colleges. So CSU Dominguez Hills has a good story to tell on this front, at least in some respect.
Well, yes, we do have a fairly diverse student population, and we're pretty dang good at making them feel welcome. We've long had an incoming student profile that closely matches the demographic mix of students who graduate from high school college ready. We're doing about as well as you could expect. However, those gaps do reappear once they're with us, and so we've got some programs intended to remedy that. A lot of it very similar to what you just heard about the co-requisite remediation and the multiple measures and things where Dominguez Hills has been doing this for a long time, and now that the system is saying that it's interested too, and Chancellor White, as you just said, we're very, very happy to see those developments. One piece that I would just add to the mix you've already heard about, and then I can stop. We've got a local program at Dominguez Hills that seems to address head-on the point you're raising about diversity and equity. And it's called the Male Success Alliance, because as you probably know, if you work in this area, male students of color are the ones who are the least likely to persist and graduate. And the reasons for that are extremely complicated and begin long before they set foot on our campus. And so there's not a whole lot to be done on the face of it. What this intervention does that I'm extremely proud of and that's gotten it some national recognition is look at those populations and ask, what are the cultural assets that can be leveraged here? What is it that these groups have that literally no one else does, that can then be used to strengthen the odds that they'll graduate? And it has to do with brotherhood, with fellowship, with pseudo-kinship relationships. This has all been researched and nationally written up. If you're interested in reading more, I encourage you to Google Matthew Smith at CSU Dominguez Hills. He's the researcher behind this who runs the program, and it works. It really, really works. And there is no deficit thinking anywhere in there. It is totally an asset-minded, cultural asset-driven approach. And I think that really is the answer. The one other thing I'll just throw in is that reports like this are the answer. A lot of these first-gen students are with us, frankly, because they want to get a better job. And when they see that we have a regional approach to workforce preparation, it reassures them that coming to college was a good idea.
Thanks very much. So let's open it up to questions. So if you have a question, just raise your hand, and then PPIC staff will bring a microphone to you. So we'll start right here.
Hi there, thank you. One thing I haven't heard you guys mention at all is online learning. And I just wanted to find out, given how tremendously impacted all of our colleges are, have you looked into how to leverage online learning?
I can tell you that the community colleges have started implementing online learning way back when, right? And quite a few of them have entire Associate of Arts degrees that you can learn on there, and we continue to do that. I'm not a community college guy anymore, but I represent those folks. So they continue to do that, and it is something that they continue to do. It was interesting that Governor Brown just asked, directed, I don't know what a governor does to a chancellor, but basically said, I'd like to see the plans for a statewide community college, online community college, full-blown community college, and he wants some plans by November. The other thing so that's happening at the community college, and how that all comes together, it'll be very interesting to see. What has been a concern for me, even when I used to be at a community college, was that the lack of online education really at our public universities, that it was just something, I don't know why they shy away from it, but flagship universities around the country offer online courses and, in fact, online degrees. And so that might be another place to explore, but so those are my comments around online.
And can I just add quickly, we have done a lot of work at PPIC looking at online learning in the community colleges, and there's some really exciting things happening with the Online Education Initiative. The big challenge is that students who take courses online are less likely to pass those courses than if they had taken that course face-to-face. So while there's a lot of good things happening in online learning, I think improving the model and especially interacting with students in a way that helps them move through the course is something that a lot of people are working on. There's a pilot right now with about, I think, 13 or 14 colleges. So it is a way to improve access and outcomes from our conversations with people who are developing and providing those courses, they don't think they're cheaper than face-to-face because the technology, building up the course and interacting with students. But having said that, I agree, it's a way to provide more access and get more completion. So thanks for raising it. Okay, I have another one back here, and then we'll move up here and over there. So.
Okay, this is a little bit more of a statement than a question, but I have a child right now that currently is at UC Santa Cruz. She's a senior. And for her, coming into high school, her freshman year, she was given a class that was not required, but recommended by a counselor. That was a college readiness and preparedness class. And in that class, they were taught every class they needed to take in high school. They were taught the college application process. They were taught how to get financial aid. They were taught about grants. They were taught about everything they could possibly need to know if they wanted to go to college. The kids in that high school that took that class, 90% of those students went on to a 4-year college after taking that class. Things like that are not offered at every high school, and they're not pushed upon students. So the education aspect of how do you go to college is not readily available. And at the same time, when they get into college, she took a class her freshman year that was a navigating the UC system. It was the exact same class, but it was how do you graduate in 4 years from a UC? Students, again, are not educated about that process and what that takes and the courses that you have to have, what resources are available to you, and truly the education aspect of just how do you succeed is lacking in all of our schools from kindergarten all the way through graduate degrees.
Point well taken. Okay.
Let me say one thing about that. Those are not bad lifelong skills either, right? That resilience, the persistence, the resourcefulness. And I don't mean that as an apology for structures administratively that are infuriating on our campuses and that we need to fix, right? Sometimes that's our answer is, oh, it'll be good for you. You'll learn how to deal with us and then you can deal with anyone. That is not what I mean. But I do think that there's a really good place for courses like that. In our case, it's the summer. We have pounced on it. And it used to be that we made students come to summer school if they weren't ready for college, and it was working so well for them, as you just pointed out, that now, even if you are ready, we'll give you free GE classes to come to our campus on the summer and learn some of those things you're talking about, because we have seen how effective they are.
Okay, so we have a question up here and then here, and then we'll get to you. Sorry.
Yes, I'm Karen Tybel. A long time ago, I was a math teacher. My question is for CSU. I think you have an outreach program for Latino communities, and you send in Spanish-speaking people to talk about college. My question is, maybe it's a comment. Maybe grade 11, 12 is too late. Yes. And maybe it should be 8th grade, because you have these students that have failed in Algebra 1. They fail again and again and again. And then what happens? They get a remedial course. And what do they have to study again? Algebra 1, which is a big failure. So do you address the Latino community in those early years?
Early enough. We do, but it's a little like what Alma said on a different topic. We know we can do better. I think the point you're making is a really good one. Two things I'll say about that. Getting into those grade levels earlier also means persuading them that college is in it for them, right? That it's in the cards, and that they should be thinking that early. And that can be difficult. One of the best ways we have of doing that, believe it or not, is our commencement ceremonies. When we have enough tickets for the extended families, then we start to see them come in really young and see themselves in that future. And we know we can get them interested in the right kind of math earlier while they're in school. The second thing that I'll say on that point is totally a work in progress. We have a new provost who begins with us on Monday, who we took from CSU Northridge, who had been the dean of their College of Education. So he comes to us with all these relationships with Latinos serving high schools in the area. And so that's why I think we'll be doing better soon.
I just make a comment about both of your comment back there and this one. You're absolutely correct. I mean, I think not only with Latino kids, just kids in general, that to start to having the conversations about post-secondary, community college guy. There's an awful lot of money to be made as a welder, a nurse, or a cop. So trust me. And that's where we're pushing for certificates and degrees, completion, right? But when we were first fighting for the University of California, Merced, to come to our city, fighting with Fresno, the big cities, but we ultimately got it at Merced. The University of California at Santa Cruz had a program they called Kids Around the University. And it started in the 4th grade, by the way. And they started in the 4th grade and it would progress. So in the 4th grade, they would come in, they start talking about college. Then they would go to the 5th grade, the 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. And each grade had a different sort of thing, so that ultimately when those kids graduated from the 8th grade or moved on, I don't know what they call it now, moving on or moving forward, when those kids got into high school, they were already literally primed, at least thinking about that. And it is something, and I'm not sure that that's happening as much anymore, but it was a wonderful program that came out of UC Santa Cruz called Kids Around the University, and they essentially started getting kids to, they're demystifying not only college for the kids, but for the parents. Right?
The only thing I would add, and particularly if you're in parts of the state where you don't have like collaboratives that are undertaking this work, or you see kind of an interest in moving in this direction, and this is something that we've tackled with, I mean, in LA County alone, you could probably name hundreds of programs that are addressing these issues and doing really well. But I think regional collaboratives by nature should really be focused around systems change. And how does, like you mentioned, you know, that one high school program at the university level become the new normal and not the exception? That should be the experience for every young adult in that region, in that school district. So I think you all, in terms of, you know, active participants in your communities, that's really what you should be trying to elicit from your collaboratives. I could say from being boots on the ground, it's not easy work and it doesn't happen overnight. So if I'm sparse on details, trust me, it's not that I'm avoiding your questions, it's just that's the aim, is to ensure that what we are trying to bring forth and put together in collaboration with our institutions is trying to fundamentally change how we operationalize this work in the interest of all students. So that's my challenge to you.
So my comment was about the I'm a Toro, which is great. I hope that's a hashtag. Because my question goes on to how are we using 21st century technologies, particularly social media, for attracting students, for tracking them. It just seems like there's a lot of potential there, so I'm just wondering what any of your three groups are doing in that regard.
Too little. There is a lot of potential there, and as yet it's untapped. Our IT division at CSU Dominguez Hills is notoriously underfunded. We're on it, we're working on it, but right now I think if you were to look for that hashtag, you may or may not find it. And I know that our website is not mobile friendly. If you try to look at it on a phone, it just gets smaller and you can't see what it is you're looking at. So it is a point very well taken in our case.
Yeah, agreed. Enough.
I hired a 23-year-old young person, and because for our particular case, for our organization, the social media, you know, you got to literally keep it up. So I hired a 23-year-old person, and just gotten out of Fresno State, and then a couple of interns, and they really are enhancing our ability to do that. The colleges themselves are at different levels, right? Some do it really, really, really well. Others just don't have the capacity. They don't have, you know, they've got other things that they're doing. So social media is really, really so essential to this population that we're pursuing now. And a person my age, recognizing at least that, and then bringing these young folks in has helped an awful lot. But in terms of our colleges, our individual colleges doing that, I mean, you just see it at different, levels.
It's not necessarily a website.
No, it's Facebook page, it's a snap hashtagging, and they do all of that, exactly.
It's having a system in place to.
Yeah.
So I think we have here, and then finally, Karen, we'll get to you.
Hi, my question is about the relationship between community colleges and CSU programs. So we talk about there being too many students at CSU programs, and we're interested in getting students to transfer from community colleges out. Mm-hmm. Why is that the dynamic, right? Why aren't we uplifting community colleges, changing the way we view the degree from community colleges, encouraging students to stay in community colleges and actually graduate from community colleges, and in that way, expanding access?
I think for us, in terms of how we're approaching it, it's not really for our systems to dictate what path a young adult is going to take. Our focus should continue to be around creating these pathways so the young adult is informed and has the ability to pursue whatever pathway they want to, and to eliminate the institutional barriers that keep them from achieving their desired dream. So I think our approach is really more around how do we streamline these processes, how do we create these pathways for kids, for young adults, excuse me, so they have the ability to choose for themselves versus us making a unilateral or trying to impress upon them something that, I mean, that's our goal.
So my comments around that would be that this report really focuses on degrees, right? Bachelor's degrees. The Central Valley Higher Education Consortium college member colleges, because there are 14 community colleges or districts in our consortium, all have the same thought in terms of community colleges. I was telling you earlier, if you go into community college and you come out being a police officer, a nurse, or this or that, you're going to make a pretty decent living. So we value career and technical education, 2-year terminal degrees, as much as we value the transfer degree. The community colleges do that. And in today's world, you're going to be hard pressed to find someone at a community college who would suggest that one is lesser than the other. And in fact, some CTE programs are tougher than the first 2 years of transfer, right? So those young people who are going out into the world, pretty bright kids. Now, as I was looking at the strategies when Kevin was making his comments, he was talking about increasing transfer and then increasing the number of freshmen. I mean, you have like a crash there, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you increase the number of transfer students, that means there are less seats for freshmen. If you increase freshmen, there are less seats for the other. And so that's a challenge. That's a challenge certainly for the CSU folks and for us all, obviously. And because if we're successful in implementing this co-requisite remediation, that's one of the things. If we're successful in doing that, there'll be a flood of young people that won't be able to get into the CSUs. And the same thing with the promises. These promises are coming up. We have a Central Valley promise that we're trying to spread throughout the valley. And ultimately, if we are promising, what is the real promise? Well, the promise has to be a seat, right? A promise, I mean, it's nice to get tuition, but a lot of our young people are either on BOG waivers or financial aid and FAFSA, that sort of thing. So a free semester of tuition isn't as impactful for them as ultimately a seat down the road. And so that's really where all of us are involved in it. And so I was talking to you about the independents and the privates. I had a young woman who was my student of the year at one of my off-campus centers, and single mom, and she was very, very bright, and her aspirations were child development. She wanted to get a degree in child development. She then she went off to Fresno Pacific. So I'm talking to her afterward, at the graduation ceremony, she said, Dr. Duran, I did the math. She said, I can go with my financial aid at a private university and what it would cost me, et cetera, versus going to University X and paying this much and then spending another year there or a year and a half there versus getting out of Fresno Pacific in 2 years. It doesn't make any sense for me not to do that. And so I think that's an alternative. I know we're talking about public institutions, but in my organization, we have also the independents and the privates who are part of our group. And I would not shy away from sending young folks in that direction.
Yeah, and to be clear, PPIC cares very much about career technical education in the community colleges. We're doing work on that, and we agree the private sector is very important in higher education as well. And so we have, I'm sorry?
I said, and they're not mutually exclusive.
No, they're not. And so we have time, I think, for one final question. So over here, Karen.
Hi, Karen Humphrey, retired Executive Director of the California Post-Secondary Education Commission, and I want to move a little bit to the macro view. I've heard first I want to say that the regions have been doing awesome work in over many years, over at least 2 to 2.5 decades, in aligning workforce development, education, economic development, and just regional goals. I think that's been very, very important work. The state support for that, including the state support for any kind of an integrated longitudinal database that would allow you to both do your own and compare results statewide, are not there. They've receded. So has support for regional economies and the kind of research that supports regional economies, which is a really vital piece. So my question is, A, how do you make it an issue in the coming governor's election about how the state should be taking leadership to address these issues on a broader statewide level and to enable support for regional efforts that can each in their own place be more successful because there's a statewide infrastructure of support?
Yeah. I would say that one, and I think my colleagues from California Forward are in the room, the way that we've tried to elevate this issue has been through the annual California Economic Summit, where much of the work has really pivoted to how do we ensure that we are providing the systems, the infrastructure needed to be able to build up these regional economies. So I know that part of our work moving forward, particularly as we are in the midst of bringing on a new governor, is to make sure that we are elevating those issues, not only for LA or San Diego, but statewide. So hopefully that helps.
Anything else? Okay.
I'm stumped. It's a good question, right? I mean, when you say how do we position this so that it is germane in the next governor's election or in the next, just at the state level, so that there's an appreciated need for longitudinal data. Good point, yeah. You know, I don't know. I don't know how this would become a prominent, pressing issue for the public. But I do think there's reason for hope aside from that there may be entities that aren't necessarily publicly funded that could provide data and insights along those lines as we get into a world of pervasive data visualization and big data and the tools that I know institutions like mine want to use to see whether our students go on to successful lives. Some of those areas of darkness where we really just can't see what's going on may be mitigated in other ways.
And then I'll put in another plug for PPIC. We do have a series of statewide, we call it our statewide speaker series, where we feature prominent politicians, including some of those who are running for governor. And higher education is something we always talk to them about. And I welcome you to go to our website and see some of those previous events and keep attuned of future events that we will have with them. And I do think that leadership from the governor's office can make a real difference in higher education. And there's, I think, some reasons to be encouraged about how important higher education will be seen going forward. And so I'll just kind of leave it at that. And we'll, of course, it depends on all kinds of things and what happens in our economy and what happens in our elections. So please join me in thanking our panel for their excellent comments. And I think we'll stay around up here for a few more minutes in case you had a question that you didn't get a chance to